Hello, and welcome to episode 64 of Public Interest Podcast with your host, Jordan Cooper, where we interview politicians, activists, advocates, and others who seek to improve the state of the world. We're here today with Tricia Cooper, immigration attorney in the Federal Circuit Court in Florida. How are you doing today, Tricia?
Very good. Thanks, Jordan.
Glad to have you. The first question I'd like to ask you is, what are you currently doing, or what have you ever done to advance the public interest, and why?
I'm an immigration attorney in Miami and Fort Lauderdale, Florida.
Mm-hmm.
I work in the defense bar, so I represent immigrants who are seeking to remain in the United States and those that are seeking to come here legally on visas, either through family immigration or employment-based immigration. And I do my best to make sure that their rights are protected, that they can go through the very complex processes that they need to go through to get here, and also that their rights are protected in immigration court, that there is due process for them.
So why is it that you were attracted to this field? You went to law school, you had clearly many options, and yet you chose to go. What attracted you to immigration law in particular?
That's a good question. Growing up, my family always traveled. We went on kind of exotic vacations, not in the United States. I think my first trip out of the country was to Kenya. And traveling abroad sparked an interest in foreign language. And so through high school and college, I studied Spanish, I studied French. My last year of college, I studied Arabic. I lived abroad several times in Jordan. I spent a year in Ecuador. And just during my travel abroad and my experiences living abroad, I was exposed to different immigrant communities and refugee populations, and I really felt attracted to their plight and their problems, and I thought, this would be a great career to use my interest in helping others and my language skills to help people in the United States. So I knew going to law school this is what I wanted to do.
Really? So what sort of languages is it mostly Spanish that you end up using? Do you use Spanish with your clients, or do you need to have a certain level of proficiency to speak about legal matters in foreign language?
So I am fluent in Spanish after living abroad for a year, and then a few months after that in law school. I also lived abroad doing asylum work in Ecuador, so I kind of picked up some of the legal language. No, I use Spanish every day on a daily basis. My clients are from Central America, South America, the Caribbean, and I've learned words like bond, which I wouldn't have learned normally.
How do you say bond in Spanish?
Una fianza.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So why would your clients come to you in particular, or just how did they arrive in America? What's their story, and what are they seeking from you?
So we have clients that fill the whole spectrum. We have people that are illegally crossing the border in Mexico, end up getting detained, and then they get transferred to other detention centers in Florida because of bed space. So we have people that are fleeing for their lives due to violence in the Northern Triangle in Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala area, and they end up in South Florida. And then we have the other end of the spectrum is very wealthy individuals who are seeking to transfer or to invest in the United States or move employees from one company to another. Mm-hmm. So we cover the whole spectrum in terms of immigration, from people that are fleeing for their lives to people who want to invest in the United States.
Interesting.
I personally don't do the employment-based immigration. I represent asylum seekers. I represent people who have criminal convictions and then are at risk of losing their immigration benefits and then need representation in court to try and keep their green cards. So that's mainly what I do.
So you have mostly Mesoamerican clients who came to America to flee violence. When I say America, obviously I mean the United States of America, because they originated in the Americas, in North America technically.
Yes.
And so there's some individuals who come here for economic opportunities, wealthier, well-educated individuals who come here even to bring jobs to America that are having difficulty staying here. But primarily you're dealing with Latin American individuals, some of whom may not speak English, who are fleeing for their lives and who have less educational attainment?
I'd say that's the truth in general terms. I have represented politicians, actually radio talk show hosts, even like yourself from Venezuela, who were enduring political persecution based on the opinions they were expressing over the radio. So there are even asylum seekers who aren't poor and uneducated. There's very wealthy and educated people as well that suffer persecution in these countries.
Do any of them fly here, or do most of them take boats or trains or walk?
So I'd say the vast majority of people coming from Central America, particularly Honduras and El Salvador, over the past few years, they are coming by foot, by bus, by train, through all of these, through Guatemala, through Mexico, until they get to the border. They're smuggled across by coyotes. A lot of the people that are coming in are actually children now.
Now, when you say coyotes, for our listeners, you're not referring to an animal. Who are you referring to?
A coyote is a smuggler. That's the term that's used for a smuggler when we're talking about Central America. When we talk about China, you'll hear the term snakehead. It means the same thing. It's the term for a smuggler.
So, is there a war going on in Central America right now? Why is there political oppression that these individuals are claiming they're fleeing?
So it's not really political oppression. The problem is the gang violence. And in my opinion, and I think in the opinion of many others, it can be defined as war right now. I think that the gangs are big enough, strong enough to be categorized as a political group that's overtaking the government. The government in Honduras and El Salvador really has difficulty controlling these gangs. They're recruiting children to be gang members. They are recruiting people to sell drugs. They target people, a lot of people who work in the transportation business, people who drive buses and want them to transport drugs. So anyone who's a young male is specifically targeted, and young women are targeted as sexual prey. I mean, that's what they are, unfortunately. I mean, they're forcing women to be the girlfriends of gang members, and there's a lot of sexual violence and oppression there, and that's what they're fleeing.
So it sounds like you deal a lot with the implications of America's war on drugs, so drug policy in the United States, and then also more directly immigration policy in the United States. Is that correct?
I mean, I don't know enough about American policy with drugs and how that is connected to the violence there and people fleeing to the United States, but I feel that there is a link. I also feel that there's a link between our policy on guns. I think, in my opinion, some of these guns are getting trafficked down to Central America and getting into the hands of people who shouldn't have them.
American guns are going to Central America.
I would. That's something I'd like to explore and, like to see research on, but that's my opinion. These aren't guns that are produced in El Salvador. So.
Oh, and do you think that these guns are illegally trafficked to Central America or legally trafficked?
No, I don't know enough about the gun laws, but I imagine they're leaving the country illegally. And
would you say that if narcotics and other forms of illegal drugs in the United States were legalized or at least removed from the situation, a lot of the violence and the gangs might diminish? Would you say that a lot of the violence in Central America is driven by control over the drug trade?
I would. I mean, that's part of the reason why they want to recruit people into the gangs. They get, they're recruiting people to sell drugs and transport drugs. So that's a big part of the problem. So fundamentally, it sounds like there's an economic driver of this violence, which is control over an illicit drug trade, which leads to violence, which leads to people fleeing the violence, which leads to immigration challenges in Florida. And it is kind of circular, because then in the United States, when people are put into immigration court, often they can be charged with drug convictions, and if they're gang members charged with drug convictions, they get deported. So we're just deporting the gang members back to where they're going to have power back in Central America, where they can work, they can, it's almost a lawless land, and they can be even more dangerous back there. So let's talk a little bit more about what Tricia Cooper does in day-to-day life. So there's some individual who, now, do they only come to you if they're already in trouble with the law, or would an undocumented person who comes here and whom the American government whose presence the American government is ignorant of, would they ever come to you? Yes, we have all types of people. I have people that come to me all the time who've been here, entered illegally 20 years ago. They're still here and have no documents, and they just want to know, is there anything I can do for them? And sometimes the answer is yes, and sometimes no. Normally, the only route I can really go is, a family-based petition. So if they are married to a U.S. citizen or a Cuban or a permanent resident, you can do a family-based petition, and then if they enter the country illegally, which many of them have, we can move forward with a waiver. It's an unlawful presence waiver that they can apply for, which if it's then approved, they can travel back and be interviewed at the consulate in their home country and re-enter the country legally with an immigrant visa. So that's the process I can do for people who just have no criminal convictions, have been here illegally, and have a qualifying relationship with a U.S. citizen or permanent resident.
So it sounds like there are plenty of human beings alive in the United States who are neither American citizens nor is the federal government or maybe even any local government aware of the presence of these individuals. Is that true?
I really don't know how aware the government is of the individuals, because these are people that they come into my office and they have no IDs except maybe an expired passport from their home country. So it's hard to really know. I mean, a lot of them are living with family that does have status. Their names aren't on lease agreements. So they really are living in the shadows still. So
they're trying to do the right thing, but in the meantime, they're living in the shadows, as you say, and that may mean that they don't really have rights that are protected. You think they're taken advantage of, say, in the restaurant industry, or paid lower wages than minimum wage, or not given appropriate benefits according to American labor laws? Are they ever taken advantage of?
Absolutely. I mean, that's part of what drives the economy of America is the ability to hire people and not pay them the wages that they deserve. And a lot of these people don't know what their rights are and are afraid to ask because they'd rather take lower pay and be able to stay in the United States than go back to.
Interesting. So, and let's talk about the preponderance of your clientele. These are individuals who've already run into trouble with some form of American government, probably the federal government. Who would they get in trouble with, and why would they seek your help, and then what do you do?
That's a very broad question. I'm trying to think of just an example.
Is there Immigration Naturalization Services? Is that an agency?
DHS. So INS was dissolved, I think, maybe in 2005, if I'm not mistaken. So now we have Department of Homeland Security. And then there's 3 branches within DHS. We have Immigration and Customs Enforcement, which is ICE. There is CBP, Customs and Border Protection. And then USCIS is U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. So yeah, I'd say at least, maybe 2/3 of my clients come in with some sort of problem with one of these agencies. Either a problem obtaining a benefit. For example, someone who's a resident and applied for citizenship with USCIS, but now they're not going to be granted citizenship because it gave the government an opportunity to review their whole file, and they came up with some alleged fraud or some problem in the background, and now instead of becoming a citizen, they're put in deportation proceedings. So that's an example with a problem with USCIS. Others, for example, are permanent residents who have some criminal conviction in their past, which is completely resolved.
In this country or somewhere else?
A criminal conviction in the U.S. Let's say an example is grand theft. They depart the country to go visit their family. They're allowed to, their residents. Upon return at the airports, they are subject to the laws of admissibility. And so if they have some sort of conviction, it'll pop up, and CBP at the airport will issue them a notice to appear in immigration court saying you are not admissible to the United States as a resident. They'll take their green cards and parole them into the U.S. And then allow them to go through proceedings in court.
Interesting. Do you ever have to visit clients in prison?
They're not called prison. It's called detention centers because these are immigration is considered civil proceedings, not criminal.
So there are people behind bars in cells in buildings called detention centers, and you visit them there?
They're not held in cells. There's much more freedom within the facility itself. I mean, it definitely looks like a jail, but they have a little bit more freedom than people in a criminal jail. But yes, I do visit them. They have attorney-client visitation rooms where I can go and see them, get documents from them, and prepare for their cases.
Now, if they have a history of violent crime in America, then they're automatically deported and they have no chance of consulting with you?
That's a big misconception. I think at least in this last election, I heard both Democrats and Republicans talking about focusing deportation policies on violent criminals. And that is true, and it has been going on under Obama already. Mm-hmm. But just because you have a violent crime doesn't mean that you're not eligible for anything to stay here. So can I give one example?
Please.
Okay, so I have one client who was, I believe, from Cape Verde. He has a conviction.
Is Cape Verde a country?
Cape Verde Islands yes, it is. I believe it's off the coast of, is it Spain or Africa? Now I'm going to sound silly. But
okay.
It's definitely not a country I see very often. He was married to a U.S. citizen and wanted to apply for his green card. Mm-hmm. He has a conviction from the 1980s for, I want to say, aggravated sexual battery with a deadly weapon. Basically,
in the United States or
in
Cape Verde?
the United States.
Okay.
Basically, comparable to a rape case. So he
served time here.
I think 6 years. I don't remember exactly how many years in prison. So fast forward 30 years, he wants to get his green card based on his marriage, but he needs a waiver for this criminal conviction. And
so he wasn't deported right after he served his time in prison.
He was not. If it had happened today, he may have. But at that time, there really was not a strong link between local governments and the federal government. Mm-hmm. So people were being released back into the population right after they served their time. Mm-hmm. Whereas now, there's more coordination, I'd say, between local and state police and the federal government.
Huh.
So oftentimes nowadays, immigration proceedings can even be carried out while someone is being detained in a state or state prison for their criminal offense. They'll appear by televideo.
So it's almost kind of funny. If you are in the United States illegally and you're being threatened with deportation, there's a guaranteed way of staying in the United States, potentially for the rest of your life. If you commit a heinous crime, they'll send you to an American prison and you will stay in the United States potentially forever, because apparently undocumented people are welcome to stay in prison for life. Is that not true?
The way you phrase it is interesting. It's not like a pleasant place. They're welcome to stay. That's the truth. I'm probably never going to represent a murderer because they're going to be sentenced to prison for life the same way that an American citizen would.
In an American prison. They won't
Absolutely.
be deported to do a sentence in another country, will they?
Well, they didn't violate another country's laws, so if they were deported to another country, that country is going to... Well, I don't know what they would do to them, but they weren't in violation of that country's law. The incident happened here.
So America probably has many undocumented persons in the criminal justice system today, and many of whom have been here for years. Is that correct?
I can't categorize how many.
But more than zero?
More than zero. More than zero. But I wanted to finish my thought on this client from the Cape Verde.
Sure.
I was able to get him his green card based on his marriage in spite of his conviction for the aggravated sexual battery.
Wow.
It's under a waiver called 212H under the Immigration and Nationality Act. And if the crime happened more than 15 years ago, all you have to show is that you warrant this as a matter of discretion and that you are rehabilitated. So due to the length of time since this conviction, that he has zero criminal convictions since then, and other supporting documents, including psychological evaluations showing he's not a danger to the society. He's been working, he's been paying taxes, he's been a faithful and good husband and father. USCIS granted this waiver.
So a rapist who has done his time has been a responsible citizen since he paid his debt to society. Is that correct?
He has, yes. I'd say this is this was a tough case, and I'd say, the vast majority of people probably wouldn't have their cases granted, but this man particularly, showed that he warranted this, that it was his only conviction, and that he was rehabilitated. So there is a standard that you have to meet and prove, and the government found that he warranted it.
How did it make you feel to take on that case in particular and then win it?
I had mixed feelings taking it on, especially after reading the police report. But if I don't think that this specific person I'm representing deserves it, I think of the family and his wife and all of the kids that he has here, and I want to keep families together. That's a big part of my job and what drives me.
So you're from Northern Virginia, but you're currently living in and practicing law in South Florida and Miami. area. So what is it about South Florida that attracted you down there? Is there any correlation between where you're living and the sort of law you're practicing?
Well, I knew that I wanted to do immigration law as soon as maybe a year before I applied to law school. So I knew what I wanted to do before I ended up in Florida. Mm-hmm. I actually ended up there because after law school, I had a clerkship at the Miami Immigration Court where I worked for a year and a half before joining my law firm. Mm-hmm. So I was assigned to Florida. We got to list our geographic preferences, but and Miami was third on my list, and that's where I was assigned. So I graduated law school in 2010, and that's where I moved for the clerkship. But what's kept me in Florida is the excitement of practicing immigration law there. Mm-hmm. We have a good court. I think the judges are very professional. I think they have a generally good reputation compared to other courts around the country. Mm-hmm. And there's a very strong immigration defense bar there, great attorneys to learn from and to have as mentors. And you see a lot of very interesting cases, mm-hmm. and there's cases that I can win. There's other parts of the country where you're going to see just the same type of case all the time, and there's not as much you can do. Here I have clients from Central and South America, from every island in the Caribbean, mm-hmm. From the Middle East, from Europe. So you see a lot of different types, and it's very interesting.
Do you see anything in the criminal justice system or in the legal system pertaining to immigration that's broken or that's frustrating that you think ought to be fixed? And if so, do you have any ideas about how we can improve?
It's a big question. I'd say personally one of the problems for me at this time is the whole idea of immigration detention. Mm-hmm. I don't think that we need these facilities at all. A lot of them are private facilities and are basically a business, and we need to reconsider whether this is something we want taxpayers' money to be spent on. I think there's alternatives that are better. I often request release of my clients, and they're often released with an ankle bracelet monitoring device. Mm-hmm. And that's not fun. I mean, I've seen my clients' ankles, and they are, sore and red from this device, but it's better than being detained. Mm-hmm. A lot of these people have no criminal convictions at all and are asylum seekers. So they're fleeing violence in their home country. Mm-hmm. They're either raped or forced to join a gang, or they've witnessed the murder of their family members. They make it to America, and they're put in jail. So I think that we have to rethink the detention. And
what would it take for these individuals to legally immigrate from their war-torn countries to this country?
That's another big misconception. I hear a lot of people saying, why don't these people just come legally? Mm-hmm. There are no legal paths for the vast majority of these people. There is no path. Mm-hmm. It's either you stay in your country or you come here illegally. There's really two ways to come to the United States: a family-based method or through employment. For employment, they're not going to have, most of these people do not have the required education or skills to be sponsored by an employer. And for family-based immigration, unless it's an immediate relative, meaning you're a minor child under 21, you're married to a U.S. citizen, all the other family-based categories have many years wait.
So is the United States the top destination for a lot of these individuals? Or, for instance, is Chile or Japan or Australia taking any of these individuals?
I'd imagine that the U.S. is the top destination because there's just been a pattern of immigration for many, many years. Mm-hmm. And a lot of these people have family members or friends here, so they know they have people they can stay with. Mm-hmm. It's also a place they can get to by land. I think for to get to Australia, they would also have to buy a plane ticket, and that's just out of the, they cannot afford that.
Right. Okay. So as we near the end of this podcast, I'd like to ask you to reflect upon your years in service to this population that you represent in court. I'd like to ask you to think about, all the work that you've done, going through law school, going through your clerkship, currently working down for the law firm. Why is it that you do it? Why are you interested in representing these down-and-out individuals, a lot of whom may have difficulty even paying their attorney's fees, a lot of whom may be more likely to lose and to win their cases before they even see you? Why is it that you have decided that instead of corporate law where you may be making millions of bucks, you're taking a career path that is designed to potentially lead you into a more challenging career. Why is it that you have chosen to help these individuals in your professional career?
First, you're right. I could be making a lot more money being in a corporate law firm, but that isn't what attracted me. I am attracted to helping people, to individuals, not to abstract businesses. And I really am drawn to helping children, victims of domestic violence. I don't know why. I just feel that I want to use my skills, my language skills, legal skills, writing skills, to help those that really don't have a voice. There just aren't a lot of people that are going to stick up for immigrants who've entered the country illegally, who are viewed favorably by a lot of our society. These are people that don't have a lot of rights under our law. The Constitution doesn't apply to them the same way it does for citizens, and they don't have a right to immigration counsel in immigration court. They can hire one, but they're not provided one for free. And I've just been drawn to this field and to helping these people.
Interesting. So that has been Tricia Cooper, a federal immigration attorney in South Florida, who speaks about her career in public service as one not driven by personal desires to advance financially, but to help individual lives of down and out luckless individuals who are in really tough spots, who have fled for their lives, who have very few legal recourses to remain in a safe place. And for Miss Cooper, what you find is someone driven to really help in the best way that she knows how. And having success some of the times seems to justify her efforts and give these people some hope. So that has been episode 64 of Public Interest Podcast with your host, Jordan Cooper, where we interview politicians, activists, advocates, and others who seek to improve the state of the world. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you next time.